When the Queen of Denmark announced her abdication in her New Year's address, it caused shockwaves in Denmark and around the world. It's being called a shrewd move to save the Danish monarchy and avert disaster after her son's marriage has been beset by rumours of an affair. In a column for The Guardian, Simon Jenkins says King Charles should follow Denmark's example and tell us when he will abdicate. He argues that it puts our archaic system to shame. And Simon Jenkins joins me now. Simon Jenkins, thanks so much for joining us. So it seems a little early in the reign of King Charles to talk about abdication. What's the point?
I'm not absolutely sure I said he should tell us now. That may be the headline, getting the better of it. But no, I mean, I'm rather in favour of constitutional monarchy. But honestly, if you're going to have 7 or 8 monarchs around Europe, all of whom are hereditary monarchs, none of them have got any power, but they are heads of state. And if they are really going all to be in their 80s and possibly disabled in some sense, it makes monarchy look very odd. And all I'm saying is I think monarchy, unimportant though it is, just ought to grow up and modernise itself a bit, and that's what I'm suggesting.
So what's your preferred date of departure for the king from the throne, then? How long do you think we should give him?
As in the case of Denmark, I think he ought to go when he thinks he can't do the job full time. The Queen was obsessed, I know, or we know, with not showing any sense that she couldn't do the job. And she did amazingly well, and she shouldn't be the example for everybody. But in 4 cases that I cite in Low Countries in Scandinavia, they've said, look, I think I'm getting on. I can't do it as intensively as I used to do it. I think I should hand over to my perfectly adequate son or heir, whoever it may be. And that's where we keep modernising the monarchy.
Now, hang on. Simon, I've got to pick you up on that. You can't give the example of Scandinavia and the Low Countries. Surely the British monarchy is a different matter altogether.
Well, all right. We've been incredibly lucky, frankly. We've had the Queen for half a century. It is conceivable we might have had Prince Andrew. I mean, you've got to be very careful how you organise this. The monarchy depends on popularity. It's entirely dependent on popularity. It's not elected, it's not appointed, it's inherited. You've got to ensure that in the case of some disaster or something going wrong or whatever, or a long illness, you can update it. And all I'm suggesting is you update it in the most obvious way of anybody doing any job. It's time expired. There comes a point where you can't be as active as you used to be. You can't do the things you used to have. And as they've done in the Netherlands, in Denmark, in Belgium, in Spain, they've said, all right, fine. I think the time's come to hand over to my son. And I cannot see what's wrong with that.
Well, one final question for you, Simon Jenkins. I mean, isn't it the case that the sort of age and wisdom of the monarch is a nice sort of counterbalance to everything else in society that's obsessed with youth and glittery new things? Isn't there something to be said for a monarch who's seen something, seen a lot of the world?
I think there's everything to be said for it. The question is it indefinite? I mean, the principle that you in some sense have got to go on until you drop dead, I think is simply absurd. The Queen Victoria, the country was really sort of under a cloud throughout her long illness at the end of her life. It's conceivable that the Queen might have gone on for another 10 years. And her job would have had to have been done by Prince Charles or somebody else. All I'm really saying is, for goodness sake, let's be sensible. The British monarchy is wonderful, it's splendid, it's admired around the world. I think it's over-elaborate, it's over-pompous, it's too extravagant in all sorts of ways. It doesn't look modern. But if it's always going to be done by someone who's in their 80s, it just looks absurd. But all I'm suggesting is, for goodness sake, let's have a sensible system whereby you do abdicate when you think you can't do it particularly well anymore. Got a perfect heir, there's nothing wrong with that. Let's go ahead with it.
OK, well, thank you, Simon Jenkins. I've got a couple of guests in the studio here, but thank you. And I hope you keep on working till you drop dead at any rate. So thank you.
I totally agree with you.
In the studio now, I have royal historian Tessa Dunlop and also the historian, writer and broadcaster Hugo Vickers. Now, let me first of all ask you both, what do you make of that? What do you make, Hugo Vickers, of Simon Jenkins' argument? Already we should talk about abdication.
Well, I don't think he understands the Constitution very well, because there are all sorts of ways that monarchs can disappear if they have to. Tommy Lascelles, who was the Queen's first private secretary and Prime Secretary George VI, he said, the monarchy is a bit like a rose bush. Every now and again you have to chop off a head to keep it going. So had we ended up, let's say, with Prince Andrew, I'm sure there would have been a way for him to have been moved to one side. It's actually a very good system. The hereditary monarchy means that you get somebody who is trained from birth for the job. It also means that they're devoted to selfless service because they know that they haven't climbed up the greasy pole of politics, they haven't fought their way up, and that in some degree they shouldn't be there. But having got into that position, they then do a very good job. And you saw the fantastic transition from the Queen to Prince Charles, which was very smooth.
Couldn't have been better, could it?
And you saw it actually even when the Queen wasn't, terribly well in the last year. He stepped in, but then when she reappeared, he stepped aside. So we got to know him in this role.
Yeah. I think we already knew him, didn't we?
Well, we knew him, yes, we did.
Quite familiar with Charles.
We had, yes. We had the then Prince of Wales around for a while.
Well, on the retirement of the elderly, I think on the basis of this article written by Simon Jenkins, we should perhaps suggest that he retires pretty damn pronto from The Guardian. It is a lot of guff, and I sit here next to a hardcore believer, sort of evangelical monarchist. I'm monarchist light, and I think we disagree on many things. But if you've got hereditary monarchy, you can't pick or choose. I mean, if we could pick, we'd all have picked Prince William when he had hair to be king, wouldn't he? Let's be frank. Imagine the tinsel and the glitter and the glamour.
I'm not so sure that you should inflict this onto Prince William any day that before it actually comes to be, because as Prince Charles, now the king, will have discovered, he has a lot of extremely tedious things that he has to do.
Oh, the hardship of secrecy, lobbying, access to cabinet papers, which palace to lay one's head at night. I mean, it's a tough gig.
If you think that, then you don't understand one thing about what he's doing and his work. I mean, he's incredibly hardworking. But being a monarch, it has a lot of responsibilities. A bit like being, the chairman of the company, not being the sort of, the managing director, the man who does the job.
One other thing I want to touch on whilst I've got both of you. Over Christmas, the final episodes of The Crown landed. I thought the whole thing went absolutely bananas towards the end. You might say earlier seasons, but you've got to admit that this one was especially bonkers. I thought the dream sequence with the Queen and Tony Blair I couldn't believe it made it to screen. Anyway, it sort of seems to me to have put to rest the whole question of whether or not The Crown is anti-monarchy or not. Because look at this clip, which really stood out to me from the very end of the series, when we have the late Queen and Duke of Edinburgh standing above what was to be their final resting place in St George's Chapel. I found this amazing.
You were born ready. You are one of a kind. By contrast, this lot. The good thing is, it's not our problem. This is where we will be, you and I, right under this stone. We'll never hear the screams from inside there.
Philip.
I found that clip absolutely amazing, Hugo Vickers. I can't think of a sentiment less likely to come out of the late Duke of Edinburgh's mouth than, once we're gone, it doesn't matter if the whole thing comes down. I can't imagine the late Queen thinking anything like that either. Do you agree?
I completely agree with you. I think that if you had any doubt at all about what Peter Morgan was up to, that clip and the extension of it, literally, that was what he's trying to get across to us. I mean,
that was the climax of the whole thing.
Yes, he was basically saying after the Queen, it's all over, the party's over. They used that very word.
Oh, come on, you two.
That's what
You're looking to be triggered. I thought
I'm not looking to be triggered. I
think you are. I
just wanted to watch some good drama, and I didn't see it.
It was bloated, it was mawkish, but it was hellishly sycophantic. I mean, actually, with the exception of that one moment when Philip says, the lot can go and scream away as much as they want when we're dead. Everyone, Harry and
Hang
William,
on,
and they
sycophantic.
it was like watching custard.
Apart from in the first seasons, both the other actresses who played the Queen made her out to be this dour, loveless, uncaring, absolutely cold.
These last episodes were sycophantic. The only baddies were the outsiders, Mohammed Al-Fayed and poor old Carol Middleton. She was seen as this Iago character, social climbing, slipping up the pole.
I think she comes out of it all right. Mohammed Al-Fayed, you've got to admit, it's kind of hard to make into a hero of the story.
Well, they did a bit, in the series before. They were rather nice about him.
They were, actually,
and they turned on him, which of course
they didn't want to turn on to the royal family. That's why. It's true. I think Peter's looking for a knighthood, Peter Morgan. I genuinely
Ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. I mean, it clearly had from the start a very strong Republican agenda. I always thought when Claire Foy was doing it that they were going to say, Claire Foy, the Queen, great, all the others ridiculous. So after the Queen, goodbye. And that's exactly what he says in that last
and you've got to admit as well, once it went into this sort of weird terrain where the ghost of Diana appears and gives advice to the Queen and then appears on a plane with Prince Charles. I mean, this drama wasn't exactly sycophantic about Prince Charles and Diana. In fact,
actually, I thought they made Charles seem sympathetic, and bearing in mind this was so clearly a drama, what it did was it spread the magic of crazy monarchy with a bit of Hollywood tinsel over the top right around the globe. It actually means that our royal family, unlike the Danish one, the one without a king that's abdicated in Belgium and the other one in Spain, is talked about. That young people know who they are, love them or loathe them. I think it's been a positive, an overall win for the king.
Hugo Vickers, you've written about all of the factual errors in the early seasons of The Crown. Have you done the later ones as well, or is that volume too long?
Oh, yes. No, I certainly have. And they were published in the Times Online, and I shall publish them as an ebook.
I made a YouTube.
Okay.
Well, I did that. I did an interview as well about all the things that went wrong. I mean, if you wanted, historically wrong, the Mrs. Thatcher scene when, Geoffrey Howe numbers out of bed, he makes his speech, she looks depressed. The minister says, come on. And then Dennis says the game's up. And then suddenly she says, I'm going to go and see the Queen and ask her to dissolve Parliament to save my skin. We know she never did that.
I felt sorry for the actress playing Princess Margaret because her neck was going to break. I thought it was just going to snap.
And I mean, they couldn't wait to have a go at Princess Margaret.
She had a hell of a time at the end. Are we not allowed to depict old age and the cruelty of it and the difficulties? Wow. Is that persona non grata?
I thought that was particularly disgusting, actually, the way they portrayed her. I really did. Yes. But then that's not the only one. I mean, the way they had Prince Philip being blamed for the death of his sister, which I know...
That was also bizarre. Anyway, we might not all agree on this, but thank you very much, Tessa and Hugo.